Okay, so we're on to task number 5 in the Understanding Money unit of Personal Finance. So this is the final task of the whole unit and the whole course, and it is all about inflation, exchange rates, and interest rates. So these are things that are kind of put onto our money that affect how much we get, and they're constantly changing. So inflation is to do with the kind of general cost of things. We'll touch on that in a minute. Exchange rates is to do with foreign exchange rates, and we know that they are constantly changing all the time. And interest rates are things that affect the money we have to pay back when we borrow money, like in a loan or a mortgage, and it also affects the amount of money that we get when we save money in a savings account, for example. Okay, so this task is just all about kind of highlighting how these things are constantly changing and what effect it has on our lives. So the first thing we're going to do here is activity 1 and 2, which is on inflation and exchange rates. Now, inflation is a word that you may hear kind of going about a lot, but you may not really know what it means. Think of inflation as just the general increase in cost in things. Okay, you are aware of inflation, you're aware it's happening, but you maybe don't even know it. Okay, and I'm posting a video onto the Teams page which explains this in quite good detail about what kind of inflation is. And it gives an example that basically the cost of things just keep on rising. Okay, that's what inflation is. Use a Freddo as an example. A Freddo used to be 5p, then it was 10p, now it's 20p, now it's 25p. It's the same size, it's just now costing more money, so you're getting less for your money, and that's essentially what inflation is. If you have £1,000 today, it does not buy you anywhere near as much as it would 100 years ago, for example. So that is basically the effect of inflation. It increases the cost of things, and it therefore decreases the value of money because you can't get as much for your money when inflation happens. Okay, so we're going to look specifically at a salary example and the effect that inflation has on that. So we've got Jake, who works out that his salary has increased by £760 over the last 3 years. Okay, and his current earnings are now £14,400. So I think we need to write that down. So current earnings £14,400. Okay, and it has increased by £760 over 3 years. Okay, so, and it says over the same 3-year period, the inflation rate, which remember that's just the general cost of things, has been running at 2.5% per year. That means it's gone up by 2. Inflation only goes up, or mostly only goes up. So it has been running at 2.5% per year on average. So that means that basically the cost of living has gone up by about 2.5% per year on average. So calculate how much Jake would be earning now if his salary had increased not by this £760, but if it had increased at the same rate as inflation. So the inflation rate is this 2.5%, and that's an increase. So what we're actually working out is a percentage increase over 3 years for a salary that we don't actually know yet. So we know currently it's 14,400 and it's increased by 760. So what was it 3 years ago? So salary 3 years ago, we just do the current salary, take away how much it's gone up by. Okay, so 14,400, take away 760. So that's going to be 13,640. So what we have to do now is work out, right, if that had increased by 2.5% per year, so increase by 2.5% for 3 years, what would the salary be? Would it be more than his current earnings, or would it be less? So we're going to start with 13,640 and we're going to multiply it by a multiplier for an increase of 2.5%. Now, if you remember, I work from percentage, 100 plus 2.5, so 102.5%, but we change that to a decimal, so 1.2 1.025. So that's just using our appreciation work. And if we multiply it once, that's going to do it after 1 year or one time. We want it after 3 years, so that's just to the power of 3. So we've got 13,640 times 1.025, and it's to the power of 3. And that tells us that the salary would be £14,688, and it's 0.788, so it's 0.79 to the nearest penny. Okay, so what we're actually, the point in doing this is to show you that, okay, it's great, he's had a salary increase by £760, but if it had just increased at the same rate as the cost of living has increased, he would actually should be getting more than what he currently earns. So it actually means that he is worse off. Even though he's had an increase of his salary, it means in terms of the net kind of cost of living, he's actually worse off than what he was 3 years ago. Okay, so how much worse off is Jake than he would be if his salary had increased in line with inflation? You'll see that phrase quite a lot, salary increase in line with inflation. Okay, that's something that you want to happen. You want your salary to increase at the same rate of inflation, just so you are able to afford the same amount, basically. So what is the difference in those salaries is all we're actually asked to do here. So this is what he could have got, basically, and this is what he actually has. So the difference is just you take the bigger one and you subtract the small one. So it's just 14,688.79, take away his current salary of 14,400. So if you pop that into your calculator, you see that it is a difference of £288.79. Now that's in a salary in a year. Now you may not think P.8, you may not think that sounds like very much, 300 quid, what's that to, who's bothered about that? It's not a huge amount to really get concerned about, but that's over a 3-year period. If you imagine scaling that up to, say, a 40-year working life, and inflation keeps on increasing and your salary is not increasing, in line with inflation, then it means you are gradually just getting worse and worse off and able to afford less and less, and going to be essentially poorer and poorer, and you'll have less disposable income at the end of each month. You may run into debt. Okay, so it's just to show you that even though salaries can be increased, that's great. Ideally, we want them to increase at a minimum in line with inflation, and if possible, higher than that. Let's look at another example. This time is talking about the effect of exchange rates. So Jake orders products for the shop that he works for, and 3 months ago he bought a case of mustard from France that cost £57.50. Okay, since then the currency exchange has changed and the pound has fallen in value. Okay, so it means that the pound doesn't buy as many euros for each pound. Okay, it's fallen in value. The pound has got weaker. The shop where Jake works needs to order a new case of mustard, but the price has gone up in line with the current exchange rate. Okay, so 3 months ago he was able to get this case of mustard for £57.70. What this means, if the pound has fallen in value, it means it's going to cost him more. Okay, so it means you're worse off if the pound has fallen in value, which means in terms of an exchange rate, the exchange rate is going to be worse for the pound, which means the case of mustard is going to cost more. Okay, so the exchange rate was 1.31 euros to the pound, and it's now 1.2. So what that 1.31 euros means, that for £1, if you exchanged it, you would get £1.31 euros. But it's changed to being, if you exchange £1, you only get 1.2 euros. So calculate the price the shop will need to pay for a case of mustard now. Okay, so the new price, it's quite a simple calculation. All you have to do is work out the ratio of the old exchange rate to the new one. So it's just 1.3 divided by 1.20, and then you're just going to multiply that by the price that you paid 3 months ago. So you'll see, if you do that calculation, 1.31 divided by 1.2 and then times that answer by £57.50, it will be slightly higher. So we get a price of £62.77. So it's the same case of mustard, it's the same size, everything else, but because the exchange rate has changed, it means that the case of mustard basically costs more. And okay, most of us are not going to deal with exchange rates in terms of buying a case of mustard for a shop, but you will have to anytime you go on holiday to a foreign country. So it's fundamental to kind of understand what these mean for an exchange rate. When you're buying currency, you want, remember doing this for my National 5 numeracy, we want the exchange rate to be as high as possible when we're going from pounds to euros. So we want as big a number as possible because that means we get more foreign currency for every pound. And if that goes down, it means that we get less. So, when you're looking to buy your foreign currency, for example, and you maybe have 2 or 3 different shops offering you different currencies, what you're ideally looking for is the biggest number in your exchange rate. So we'll just finish this question off though. How much has the price gone up by? Well, that's quite simply, you take the new price and you take away the old price. So difference is £62.77, take away £57.50. And that's a difference of £5.27. Okay, so this activity was really, first of all, with inflation, getting you to have a wee understanding of what that word means, inflation. It can be quite complicated. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and I would encourage you to have a watch of the video that I've posted on the Teams page, which goes into some good detail about things that affect inflation and kind of some historical examples of how inflation has had a massive impact on some economies. And then exchange rate is something that we're more familiar with because most of us have, probably either been on holiday or know people that have gone on holiday and dealt with foreign currency. So that's something that we are more familiar with. And again, it's just something that's constantly changing. So you have to be constantly on the look for what is going to be the best price. It's not just going to stay at the same price, not going to stay at the same rate. It's going to be constantly changing. So you need to try and get the best deal whenever you are dealing with an exchange rate.